Alright guys, welcome back. So in the last section we worked a lot on the UI. So basically just, the nav bar, some of the pages. We also added we restricted some of the routes. Now we want to be able to work with stories in our database. So the first thing to do when you're adding a resource to your database is to create a model. So let's go over to our models folder. We already have a user model. Now we're going to go ahead and create a new file called story.js. Okay, so this is going to be our story model. Now what I'll do is just copy the entire user model and go ahead and paste that in, and then we'll just switch some things up. We'll change this to story schema. Okay, it's going to be a new schema. It's going to have a title, which will be a string. It's going to be required. It's going to have a body, which will be a type string required. We're going to have a status. Okay, so for status, it'll be type string. Now for this, we're going to set a default. Okay, so we're going to set a default for status of public, like that. All right, so let's see. We're going to have an allow comments option. So let's go ahead and say allow comments. Now this is actually going to be a Boolean. It's going to be a true or false. So we'll say type Boolean, and we're going to set the default of that to true. Okay, we want to accept comments by default unless the user specifically says they don't want. All right, now this image, we're going to change this to comments. So for comments, this is actually going to be set to a bracket. Okay, so this is going to be, comments will be an array of objects. So we want to set a bracket, and then we want to put some curly braces in here, and then we're going to define each field. So we want a comment body. Okay, and that's going to be type string. And let's make that required. Okay, in addition to a comment body, we want comment date. That'll be type date, and we're going to set the default to date.now, which will put the current date, so we don't have to worry about filling that in. And then it'll also have a comment user. All right, now comment user, just like the user field, which I'm going to put down here in a minute, is going to be a reference. Okay, so it's going to be a reference to the user model. We want each comment user to have to be one of the users that's registered. Okay, so what we do is we set the type, and this is basically like a relationship. Okay, if you're used to relationships with relational databases, we're going to set it to schema.types.object ID. Okay, so it's going to be related to an object ID from another table, and we need to put that reference table, and that that reference collection or model, and that's going to be users. Okay, so that's it for comments. Now we're going to do user. So let's go underneath here. Let's put a comma, and then we're going to have a user associated with the story, and that's going to be the same exact thing as what we just did with the comment user. It's going to have the type of schema, types, object ID, and the reference of users. And this is going to allow us to do some cool stuff. Like if we want to access, let's say, the username of a story, of the person who wrote a story, we could say story.user.firstname. We can do stuff like that. Okay, so that's why we're using this type instead of just, we could use a string and we could still put the user ID in there, but we won't get that extra functionality. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to put is just the date. All right, and just like the comment date, it's going to have a type of date, and it's going to have a default of now. And that's going to be it. Actually, this date now doesn't need parentheses. All right, cool. So that should be good. Now we just want to go right down here, and we want to change this to stories. Okay, we're going to change this to story schema. Now I'm going to provide a third parameter here of stories. And the reason for that is because I don't want it to automatically create a collection called stories like that. So we're going to specify that it's going to be stories with an IES. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. And that should do. So title, body, status. Allow comments, user, date. Yeah, so that looks good. So let's go ahead and stop here. And then what I want to do in the next video is I want to give functionality to the add form. Okay, I want to be able to add a story to our database through our application.